So it's 10:01 Geneva time, if you all agree, because we have many people online already waiting. I'm looking at Jacqueline. As she will, I will now officially launch this event. So we are now officially launching this event. Excellencies, dear colleagues, good morning to who is with us here at the International Environment House, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is with us on WebEx or now watching the video of this event. We have the pleasure to welcome you today for a new chemicals and waste negotiations briefing organized within the framework of the Geneva Environment Network, which will provide an overview of the work and key activities to advance the sound management of chemicals and waste globally. Jacqueline Alvarez, the new chief of the United Nations Environment Programme Chemicals and Health Branch, will chair this session. Before we give her the floor, let me remind you that the documents presented, the summary, as well as the video of the event will be made available on the webpage of this event. The link is being shared by my colleagues in the chat or is available on the screen. Throughout the event, those who are online can raise their questions by using the Q&A box. We will use your questions to feed the discussion after the presentations if times allow. With that, Jacqueline, over to you.
Good day to everyone, those of you that are present here with us and those of you that are online. It's a pleasure to be moderating this session with my colleagues. Always great to have them around. So I will be very brief in my opening remarks, particularly addressing this year as a year of change, where we learned many things, but we also recognize the need of face-to-face activities. And though here we are not many, it's very important to see the faces of each other. 2023 is a year of promise. We have a lot of negotiations coming in, and we are going to hopefully make a change in the near future. Of course, practically many of the things that we will be embracing as new will have an end of 2024, but we still have a lot of work to do with our colleagues of the conventions. They have already done this path in many aspects, and it is essential for them to tell us the story of how things can evolve in a positive manner. I will refer a little to what happened last week. 1,300 people met in Punta del Este in Uruguay for the INC, the committee discussing plastics. It's very good to see as well how those principles that we have been embracing in this agenda are continuously being used because they are working. And I will refer to the life cycle approach, to the system thinking, the benign by design, and you will hear later today some of those aspects, the need of technological change, the need to address waste in a very good manner, the POP's presence in the plastics, but also how to really deal with the zero waste approaches. Everybody was repeating once and again the need to do these things based on science. And we have Kevin here as well that will tell us a little more about the discussions on the science policy. A new treaty going to build on what we know, but also needs to have new features. So we need to be very creative and innovative to put those things forward in the right way. It needs to be feasible. It needs to be something that we all can work towards. So with that, I will pass the floor to my colleague Carlos here, who will be telling a little of the next things happening in the PRS.
Gracias, Jacqueline. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a pleasure for me to welcome you today to this Chemicals and Waste Negotiations briefing. On behalf of the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, I take the opportunity to thank the Geneva Environment Network for organizing today's event. In the BRS Secretariat, we have been with a very intense intersessional period since our COPs in June 2022, with 14 meetings having been organized since the last Chemicals and Waste Negotiations briefing in September 2022, and 8 new planned now until the COPs that we will have in May 2023. So in total, in this a bit less than 1 year, we are organizing 22 intersessional meetings. So you can imagine the intensity of the work in the third floor of this building. My colleague, David Owen, will provide you more details on the results achieved in some of these meetings. The VRA Secretariat has also been very active, raising awareness on how the work under the 3 conventions to protect human health and the environment from hazardous waste and chemicals also contributes directly to achieve the objectives of the MEAs. For instance, the VRA Secretariat recently contributed to the high-level discussions held in the UNFCCC COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and emphasized the links between illegal traffic of waste, poor waste management, and greenhouse emissions. Also, the VRA Secretariat participated in the last plenary of the IPCC with the same objectives. For more information on the interlinkages between the chemicals and waste and climate change, I invite you to consult the joint VRS and Minamata Secretariat's publication of May 2021 on how the chemicals and waste interact, are interlinked with the climate change agenda and the potential for coordinated action. The VRS Secretariat has also contributed to the Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee that Jacqueline referred to, that is negotiating the new plastics agreement, and participated in the INC1 held last week in Punta del Este, Uruguay. As you are aware, through the plastic waste amendments, the Basel Convention is currently the only international treaty to legally bind countries to minimize the generation of plastic waste, strict control the transboundary movements, and ensure the environmental sound management. In addition, the Stockholm Convention controls several hazardous chemicals used in plastics production that requires countries to manage waste in such chemicals in an environmental sound manner. Thanks to the support of Norway, the Secretariat is undertaking a study to map the global governance landscape of plastics and associated chemicals, and to identify governance gaps and complementarities with existing multilateral instruments. The study is set to provide possible consideration for the role of a new plastic instrument in regulating plastics and associated chemicals. The draft report is available for comments by 10 of January 2023. In addition, the VRS Secretariat will also participate, as from next week, in the COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity. The Global Biodiversity Framework that is being negotiated has 22 targets. The VRS Convention has contributed directly to achieve the target number 7, to reduce pollution from pesticides, fertilizers, and waste. For more information on the interlinkages between the chemicals and waste and biodiversity, I invite you to consult the joint VRS and Minamata Secretariat's publication on this topic of May 2021, on the interlinkages between chemicals and waste multilateral environmental agreements and biodiversity. Key insights. Excuse me. As mandate for our COPs, the VRS Secretariat has also worked with and collaborated with the Minamata Convention, SAICAM, and the Science Policy Panel that also you will hear about during this briefing this morning. We have focused on cooperation with the entities present at this briefing, either on bilateral basis or through the existing cooperation and coordination instruments between our secretariats. Under this task force that is coordinating the work of the secretariats, intersecretarial working groups were established to enhance the cooperation between the VRS and the Minamata Conventions. Cooperation between the VRS Convention and the Minamata Secretariat is continuing under the renewable mandates from our 2022 COPs on relevant programmatic and technical issues, for instance, on mercury waste and on the sharing of relevant Secretariat services as appropriate. We will report on this cooperation and prepare an outline of our future cooperation activities for the next biennium for consideration for the upcoming COPs in 2023. We will also participated in the online first part of the open-ended working group on the new Science Policy Panel, and we will participate in the second part of this meeting face-to-face in Bangkok at the end of January, beginning of February, but Kevin will report about this more in detail later. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the European Union draft packaging regulation that contributes to the work of the Basel Convention to prevent and minimize waste generation. If approved by the European Parliament and the European Council of Ministers, the revised European Commission Packaging and Packing Waste Regulation published on the 30th of November has the potential to become a game changer in addressing plastic waste from packaging through more reuse and refilling, tighter controls of packaging, clear instructions to facilitate recycling, and minimum standards products that aim to be bio-based, biodegradable, and compostable. And indeed, this will be a huge contribution to the INC on plastics, because as we know, packaging is mostly about plastics and sometimes paper, carton, but it would be a gigantic move forward. So thank you very much for this, and I will answer some questions later if there's any. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Thank you very much, Carlos, for these opening words. It's impressive, the work that BRS always does. 22 intersessional meetings, that's a lot. Now I'm looking at my right. Monica, for your opening remarks, please.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, and good day, the Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues. It's my pleasure to join you today, and also thank you to Geneva Environment Network for organizing what I would call end-of-the-year briefing on chemicals and waste negotiations. Both Jacqueline and Carlos mentioned many activities or negotiations ongoing currently globally, both for new platforms, instruments, but also within ongoing multilateral environmental agreements, for sure, including also INC for plastics treaty. Still, I have chosen to focus on two issues in my welcoming remarks, and one of those is biodiversity. So let me build what Carlos has just outlined as our joint activities. In this regard, as the world comes together to address the global biodiversity loss and its interlinkages with climate change and pollution, I would like to draw your attention to the very strong links between action to address biodiversity loss and actions to address mercury pollution. I attended the Geneva Environment Network executive briefing on the UN Biodiversity Conference just a couple of days ago. It focused on preparations for COP15 of CBD, COP MOP 10 for the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, and MOP 4 for the Nagoya Protocol on access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from its utilization. And I speak about these three instruments because I think it's important, as we have learned, that is not only Convention biological diversity. And it was a very informative event. So thank you, Jen, for bringing these important discussions to Geneva. However, I have to say I felt a little bit unsatisfied with the level of emphasis on pollution, taking the role the pollution has in driving biodiversity loss, including marine biodiversity, and the role that has been known and recognized for decades, including in the recent IPBES reports. Mercury is extremely toxic pollutant that once released to the marine environment through anthropogenic sources puts further pressure on biodiversity and ecosystems. And in the tropical forest, where mercury is used in small-scale gold mining, we have multiple impacts from mercury being released to air, water, and land. In tropical forests, including Amazon, deforestation can have a major impact on cycling of mercury and its absorption in the environment. In oceans, mercury is accumulating in marine organisms and makes some of the fish species unsuitable for consumption in any larger quantities, especially by pregnant and breastfeeding people. And in the high Arctic, we know there are scientific data series and also profound indigenous knowledge available to clearly show the entire range of impacts mercury pollution creates. And in those environments, mercury impacts many ecosystem functions, such as the provision of food, air filtration, water purification, and also livelihoods and health of hundreds of millions of people, including indigenous peoples who are commonly recognized as the guardians of most of the world's biodiversity. And recognizing and against this background, the Conference of the Parties in March this year adopted a decision that for the first time really calls for closer cooperation between Minamata Convention CBD by requesting Secretariat to come up with recommendations how the convention can contribute to the implementation of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. A similar decision has been or was taken by BRS COP in May. And this post-2020 global biodiversity framework, which is being negotiated as we speak at the ongoing COP15 Montreal, includes Target 7, Carlos mentioned it, on pollution. And this is the main target where the work on implementation of Minamata Convention fits in. And it remains to be seen what the outcome of negotiation on this particular target will be. However, already now, based on our experience so far and discussion with parties, as we have engaged to seek input how to best implement our COP decision, I can say that much work remains to be done to raise awareness about the Minamata Convention. And building this first step to raise awareness is the necessary foundation and enabler of greater integration at the national global levels when implementing Minamata Convention and the new global biodiversity framework. Making nature positive for people and planet is the way forward within CBD to address one of the triple planetary crises, and Minamata Convention is one major instrument to help to achieve that. And this will be the message and commitment I will bring to the high-level segment of COP in Montreal next week. The second issue I would like to address is our milestones we are achieving regarding, on one hand, implementation compliance committee, so something also to perhaps draw on when negotiating plastics treaty, that having such a committee agreed from the very beginning is clearly a benefit to a agreement or multilateral environmental agreement, and milestone in and that's on one hand, but then also to match it to have a financial instrument to support implementation of the convention. Our implementation compliance committee has recently met and will be meeting again next year, and for the first time is looking at the full national report submitted by parties that provides information and a more clear picture on the discrete needs of each of the parties in implementing the convention. And it is extremely important that these needs can be met with support of capacity building, technical assistance, including through this financial mechanism of the convention. And this is JEF and a specific international program. With the record replenishment of JEF 8, our hope is that SIP, Special International Program, will enjoy a similarly robust replenishment at a much smaller scale, but for its distinct purposes that are not fulfilled by JEF or by the special program. Simply, we see a growing interest and capability of developing countries to apply for funding for SIP. And I would like to invite countries to consider providing contribution to the SIP so the convention can fulfill its important aims within the first decade of implementation. We had a very good governing board of the specific international program just recently. I would really hope that for their next meeting next year, I could bring a good message that we have a sufficient amount of money to launch the fourth call for project proposals. But with that, let me finish, and thank you so much. Jacqueline, over to you.
Thank you very much, Monica. It's always a pleasure to hear and being reminded of the system thinking that we tend sometimes to forget when we are working on our areas, but also highlighting the means of implementation. Thank you for the opening remarks. Now, I'm turning over to my colleague, Kevin Helps, sitting here. He will tell us a little where we are on the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution Prevention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and good morning, afternoon, evening to all here and online. As Jacqueline mentioned, I think this is the second briefing that I've given on the process to establish the new panel. So I hope we're not repeating ourselves too much in this one, but there has been some progress since the last briefing, which I'd like to bring to your attention, and also flag some forthcoming events and areas where we would welcome your inputs and support moving forward. So, a little bit of background just to recap on where this comes from. This comes from the UNEA Resolution 5.8 to establish the third panel to deal with the third planetary crisis, to be a triplet along with IPCC and IPBES. And that we are now in the process of the ad hoc open-ended working group, which actually started its work in March of this year, with an aim to complete the OEWG process and hold an intergovernmental meeting by the end of 2024. Now, there are some conditionalities which I will be adding to that timeline as we go through this presentation, because there are some factors which do threaten that timeline, which I think it's a timely reminder to bring to your attention ahead of the resumed first session, as was mentioned, which will be held in Bangkok at the end of January next year. So this is a very simplistic timeline which shows where we are. We're currently in this intersessional period 1.1, where we are now working on substantive documents which will be shared with member states and stakeholders later this month, both in English and translated into all UN languages. There are a series of documents which I'll touch upon shortly, main meeting documents and also associated information documents, which are currently being developed. The aim is to have these all available with the required 6-week review period for member states to consolidate their comments and questions and reviews in their regional groupings ahead of the meeting, which will be held in Bangkok on the 30th of January to the 3rd of February next year. You'll see that we have then a second meeting tentatively scheduled for Q4 2023, and a final meeting in Q4, hopefully 2024. Now, we are, however, in a little bit of a difficult situation with the second meeting, in that the proposed host country has now confirmed that they will not be able to host that second meeting. So we are currently looking for options from member states on where we can host that second meeting. I am pleased to say that our friends from the government of Switzerland have made a very gracious offer to host the third and final meeting ahead of the intergovernmental meeting, which will be needed to establish the panel. You'll notice also that the dates for that third meeting, there is a date Q4 2024 or Q1, Q2 2025. And I'll touch upon why those dates are there a little bit later. But there is a risk of this moving into 2025, and it's primarily related to access to finance and resources. So that's our tentative timeline. There's a lot of work to do in between with only 3 meetings. We don't have the luxury of the INC Plastics, which I think has 6 meetings. How they're going to organize 6 meetings in such a short time period, I don't know. But we are limited to 3 meetings, and we need to cover an awful lot of ground in each of those meetings and in each of the intersessional periods if we are to establish this panel in the due time. So we did have a preliminary 1-day procedural meeting in October in Nairobi, and this was very well attended, over 500 participants with 80 member states represented, along with secretariats from the MEAs here, and also accredited IGOs, NGOs, UN entities, academia, private sector, and industry. So there is a lot of interest from across all the stakeholder groups in this process, I'm pleased to say. We were able to elect 7 of our 10 Bureau members, including the appointment of a rapporteur and the appointment of an interim chair. Now, this is probably worth just a little bit of explanation. One of the Western Europe and other group candidates was put forward as the chair of the process, but this was exceptionally objected to by one of the member states present at the meeting, which means that we have to take that process for election of the chair through to the meeting in January. So we have allocated an additional day in that meeting to deal with these procedural issues which are carrying over from the October meeting. We were hoping to appoint the chair and finalize the Bureau membership in this October the 6th meeting, but unfortunately it wasn't possible. Assuming that nomination and appointment of the chair goes ahead, we will then be left with one region which will remain to finalize and formally nominate its Bureau membership, and that's the Eastern European group. And we eagerly await them to come forward with their confirmed nominations for the 2 places which they have on the Bureau. So we're hopeful that that will be concluded in January, but we do have contingency plans put in place if that isn't the case. We did also adopt our UNEA rules of procedure for the open-ended working group process, not for the new panel, I stress. So we do have a set of rules to which we will be operating, and we have had an initial exchange of views on the establishment of the panel from many member states and from many major group stakeholders. The 7 Bureau members are listed here. So we have the 2 from the Latin American group, 2 from the Asia group, Asia Pacific group, 1 from the Western European and other groups, and 2 from Africa. The member from Iraq is starred, you'll notice there, and that's because we're now going through a process of that Bureau member being replaced by a representative from China. Some of you will know, I think, Professor Li from the Basel Regional Center in Beijing, and he has been put forward as the confirmed Asia-Pacific candidate, and the candidate there from Iraq has agreed to step down, and we're in the process of exchanging the formal letters to allow that to happen at the moment. So, why did we have an open-ended working group 1.1 and now we're having a 1.2? Well, the 1.1 was a requirement because the actual resolution says that the open-ended working group will start its work in 2022. So we have to have a meeting for that to formally be the case. Now, looking at what happened with the open-ended working group for the plastics process in Dakar in May of this year, it was decided that we could have a highly procedural, very quick one-day meeting in Nairobi in order to meet the requirement of the resolution and start the process running. But that the substantive element of that first meeting would be moved to a January session. So this is the reason why we have this first meeting split into 2 sessions. So it is now scheduled for the 30th of January to the 3rd of February in the ESCAP Center in Bangkok. And you are still able to register online until the 20th of December. But I'm afraid that all applications for sponsored travel are now closed. So if you've missed that deadline, I would encourage member states and other groups to perhaps go to the regional bureau member if there is a need for travel support. And on an exceptional basis, we may consider reopening it. But after this meeting, I do actually have a meeting with our Governance Affairs Office in Nairobi, where we will be finalizing to a large degree the list of sponsored travel that we will actually be supporting for that meeting. So I'm afraid it would be very difficult for us to reopen that. If you have any practical questions, there is a meeting page which you can access. And I think this presentation will be shared and the links should be live. Our agenda, these things are fairly standard, but there are some key points to look at here. At that first meeting in October, we were requested by member states to focus this second meeting primarily on issues related to the scope and the functions of the new panel. So we were intending initially to also open the discussion on rules of procedure and governance of the new panel, but we are now just focusing on these issues of scope and functions. So the majority of the work and the contract groups will be to be established will be focusing on those two areas, along with the budget and work plan for the open-ended working group process. So that is the focus of this meeting. And we are hoping that we will make significant progress in the area of functions, particularly where the resolution is very well, the functions are very well defined in the resolution. So we have provided an options paper, which will be shared very soon on what those particular functions would actually look like. And similarly, we've developed a document on examining the potential scope and the options which we face and the decisions which need to be made by the member states moving forward on defining this. Now, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation here because we are really dependent on having a clear set of functions and a clear scope in order to define the stakeholders with whom we need to interact. But at the same time, we need a broad group of stakeholders to have input into those discussions, along with member states, to actually table proposals and suggestions as to the functions and scope of the work that we need to look at. So we are hoping to have an inclusive process which allows academia, industry in its broadest sense, civil society, NGO groups, all to have an opinion and be able to come up with ideas and suggestions as to what this new panel should look like or could look like, and what the implications of the variety of scopes and functions would mean in terms of operationalization and also the inform the governance structure which we need to have in place in order to make that happen. So it's very intertwined. It's going to be a complicated discussion, I'm sure, the scope particularly. And we hope that we've provided enough background in the documents to stimulate a very healthy and fertile discussion there. So this just very quickly, summarizes that we will be looking primarily at options for scope and options for principal functions. We do need to look at the issue of timetable, budget, and sequencing of the open-ended working group. And here, there is a stark realization which needs to be you need to be made aware of. In that, after this meeting, which terminates on the 3rd of February, basically all of the funds for the operation of the open-ended working group will be exhausted. So we will be in a situation, unless funds do come online very soon, that we will have to pause the work. Now, this is the issue which concerns the shift or the possible delay in the second and third meetings and the potential for this process to actually extend into 2025. Because without operating finance and capital and any sort of financial liquidity, even though we have a very small secretariat staff who can do some work, it means that we can't start planning for meetings unless we have funding in place. So it's a very unfortunate situation. It's a reality of a lot of competing priorities and a lot of sort of global issues which are going on at the moment. And we are hopeful now with some recent discussions with a couple of very potentially large donors that they'll come forward and support us. But there is a risk that if there are delays in funding coming forward, we will have to press the pause button on this process. So this is the list of meeting documents which are being prepared. As I say, these are all currently in for translation into the 6 UN languages, and we are hoping that we'll be able to make an advanced English version available in the coming week, with the translated versions being available 6 weeks before the date of the meeting. Now, it's a little bit unfortunate that there's Christmas in that period, but I'm sure you all enjoy a good read over the Christmas period. So perhaps you can, save on Christmas presents and give these documents out to your families and get their views and comments on them. Just an idea there. We also have a series of information documents which we're currently finalizing, and one of the major efforts which is going in at the moment, where we have a team of, I think, 4 people currently working on this, is the mapping analysis of the current landscape. It's a very, very cluttered, complex, interrelated landscape in terms of different bodies and different stakeholders who are highly active in this area. We have BRS and Minamata and SciChem in the room. Just to name 3, and defining the interrelationship between any new panel and the existing bodies and the existing MEAs needs to be done. And then obviously there are implications in terms of getting their governing bodies to come back and say, yes, we agree with this type of interaction. We're also looking at what we can learn for future meetings by a comparative analysis from existing assessment structures and stakeholdering, and also, inventory of rules of procedures in preparation for the second and third meeting. So just to lay the foundation and the seeds for those future discussions in those key areas. We're also going to give an analysis of the existing work which has been done on stakeholder engagement through surveys and webinars, and we'll be showing sort of some trend analysis and some key points from that. We're also proposing then a series at the meeting in Bangkok, a series of, should we say, what we're calling deep dive dialogues with a small panel of experts looking at key aspects of scope and functions as defined in the meeting documents and also as in the original resolution. This is really to open this discussion and have inclusive dialogues across stakeholder groups. We previously called this a stakeholder forum, but we think that this sort of description actually is a truer reflection of what we actually want to achieve. We want to get views from across stakeholder groups as to where this could land, what our ambition should be. The budget status, I've actually just touched upon. These are the member states, and again, France, Germany, Norway, Switzerland, the UK. Thank you so much for your contributions. Something which isn't up on here is the contribution from the 2022-2023 UNEP Environment Fund of $275,000. So it shows that we are, serious about supporting this, and also currently we are covering most of the costs of the Secretariat. So, this is an extra budgetary process, and we do need to find a way of covering that in future. Last two slides now. We have already reached out to WHO and IMC member organizations as stipulated in the resolution. We're in continuous dialogue with relevant MEAs and other panels, and continuing our efforts to reach out with CSO, IGOs, academia, and private sector. So we really want to seize this initiative after the second 1.2 meeting and continue these efforts to engage, but without adequate resources, we'll not be in a position to do so. We did conduct a stakeholder engagement survey, 386 responses so far. We will be providing an analysis of this document as INF6 at the meeting. We also have a series of webinars where we're planning to continue on the two that we've held so far, one in the week of 16th of January, to again look at scope and functions and perhaps provide some more information after the issuance of the papers, meeting documents, and get some feedback from member states. Finally, the national focal points issue. We are still missing a lot of national focal points. We only have 109 registered. We have very few from the Latin America region and Caribbean region. And so we are urging our bureau members to assist us to fill those gaps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And it seems that Santa is coming to town, right? I hope not only with documents, but also with some maybe coins or bills. But anyway, thank you very much for the presentation. I think we will let the questions for afterwards. Now I'm looking at my colleague Rafael to guide us through what's happening on the SAICM process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation to Jen. I'm here on behalf of the SAICM coordinator, Nalini Sharma, who unfortunately couldn't be here. And it's the first time I think I'm here and speaking to you, so I would like to say that my name is Rafał Brykowski, and I work in the SAICM Secretariat as a Program Management Officer. My presentation today will be focused on one event that actually has been finally scheduled into two dates, because we have, I would like to speak with you about the updates regarding the strategic approach and sound management of chemicals and waste beyond 2020 intersessional process. And I will speak about the upcoming event, but actually to give you a full picture and to actually provide you with the understanding why we are meeting in the resume session in Kenya, I need to a little bit go back and tell you some few words about the outcomes and of the suspended IP4 meeting in Bucharest. It's an obvious thing that to start with saying that the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, has affected all of us, but I think that it was particularly relevant for the intersessional process, which has been halted for quite a while. And it was a real pleasure to see so many people arriving to Bucharest to meet in person at the end of August, and to have a very fruitful discussions on how to come back to the work and to going into the final stages of the negotiation of the future beyond 2020 instrument. So we had around 300 participants coming from governments, from academia, from industry, from the civil society, and other groups of stakeholders in Bucharest. The work that has taken place in Bucharest focused basically on trying to get our future structure our future structure of the instrument. I think the presentation has been lost for a moment. I will continue talking. So basically, the focus was to try to get to our structure of the instrument and a document, a single consolidated document that would reflect all of the proposed approaches and elements of the future framework into one place. And to support that, there were three thematic groups that have been established in Bucharest. And the first one was with a mandate to work on a vision, scope, principle, approaches, and strategic objectives. with a particular goal to have propose a limited set of priority targets into support of the strategic objectives. If you follow the discussions, you may know that we had around more than 100, if I remember correctly, around 140 targets proposed. So it was great to say that at the end of the discussions in Bucharest, we have made a huge progress with identifying 28 high priority targets. And also there was a very good discussion about how to fine-tune the wording of the 5 strategic objectives, and progress was achieved there. Finally, we have also had 3 new options proposed for the vision of the future instrument, and this should be a basis for the future work. The time hasn't allowed to work in detail on several of elements, including detailed text of the targets and also on indicators. So this is one of the things that actually will follow in the meeting in Nairobi. The second thematic group work was focused on institutional arrangements, and that will include also the work in relation to issue of concern. As you know, there is under SICAM we have several issues of concerns and emerging policy issues that are a very important part of the SICAM work. But also, as Kevin was mentioning, there was also discussed linkages with the Future Science Policy Panel, which is, I think, building on his words, is difficult from perspective of the Science Policy Panel to see how everything works, how to link everything. But I would say that actually, from the perspective of building a new instrument, is also an additional level of complexity and challenges. So I wanted to say that discussions were taking place in Bucharest, and there is a consensus that there is a need to have linkages, but there are discussions still to follow on how to actually do it in practice. Moreover, the group has discussed also the mechanisms to support implementation, and a lot of progress was done in relation to institutional arrangements such as the Bureau or the governing body of the future framework and instrument. Finally, the third group, it worked on was focused on means to support implementing measures, also to support capacity building and discuss financial considerations. There have been a significant progress in trying to remove brackets from the text that has been discussed, but also we need to note that actually there were many additional proposals for the text included in the discussions in Bucharest. For instance, from Africa Group on the global coordinated fee, or for ICCA on a capacity building platform. Iran, Switzerland, and ITOC had also provided some input to the discussions. This leads me to the final slide on the previous IP4, suspended one, that to mention that in the end, the co-chairs were happy to present a consolidated text in the plenary on the final date of the meeting, which highlighted the vast amount of work that has been done, but also it also was seen that actually there is a need to continue working on many elements. Therefore, the meeting has decided to suspend IP4 and resume in early 2023. And I will just move very quickly to the next information about the agreed timing and the new meeting. But I just wanted to mention that also at the same day, it was finally announced the dates of the ICCM5, which the ICCM5 president announced, and it will take place in between 25th and 29th September 2023 in Bonn, in Germany. Another thing that I wanted just to mention, and you may remember the slide also from the last briefing, that very important discussions were also taking place during IP41 in Bucharest about strengthening integrated approach to chemicals and waste management. And there was a proposal coming from IOMC organizations that included 3 key dimensions of such strengthening. One would be a development of basic chemical management systems and capacities in all the countries. The second dimension is to have implemented integrated approaches in key industry sectors and product value chains, which is something of great importance and relevance. And also how to strengthen an integration of the work on chemicals and waste management with broader economic, social, and sustainable development objectives. These discussions will continue. I think that my colleague Sandra will give some further information about how this work is also taking place in the intersessional area at the time. So I will not move much, concentrate on that. And I would just like to mention that as it was announced in Bucharest, there have been discussions and there have been a silent procedure taking place with all the SICAM stakeholders in October. that allow us to confirm that the resume meeting will take place between the 27th of February and 3rd of March 2023 in Nairobi, Kenya. We plan to have 2 days of preceding meetings. Saturday on the 25th February will be focused on technical briefings, and on Sunday we expect to have regional stakeholder and sectoral meetings. The invitations to this resume meeting, as well as provisional agenda, which is by the way the same that for the suspended meeting, has been circulated to SAICOM stakeholders on 11 November. We have already provided the first version of practical information for meeting participants. Any of you interested in details regarding visa, hotels, or any other things that might be of importance for the practical preparations for going to the meeting, you're welcome to have a look on the document, which is the direct link is introduced in the slides. But also there is a meeting website that you will see in a second that have more than this, also additional information regarding the meeting documents, working and information documents. We also require and ask participants to register. There is a link directly in the slides in case you would like to forward it or to share it with your constituencies. We would like to just remind that the deadline for non-funded delegates is still in January. However, we have, I just would like to mention that initially we had a deadline for delegates requesting funding to be the 7th of December. However, we have yesterday circulated information that we would like to extend the deadline a little bit more. So now the deadline is 14th of December. I encourage all of you to circulate that information if it hasn't yet been received by SAICOM Secretariat Communication. And we would like to also say that we had 300 people in Bucharest, but we had made efforts with all our stakeholders to increase the participation for this important IP4 resume meeting. So we should be happy to be able to provide some additional support for members from many regions. Apologies, I will finish shortly. So just to let you know that we would like to and will involve the Bureau members and the regional representatives from all the regions and all the stakeholder groups to support us in selecting the funded participants. And also to support coordination among SAICOM stakeholders coming from the governmental authorities and bodies from the same country. This time we also asked during the registration process to provide some letter from the SAICOM focal point about supporting the nominations. As mentioned, this is a resume meeting, so all the documents that have been used for IP4 are already available, and you can have a look on the fourth intersessional meeting webpage. And we'll be also providing more information specific for IP4 as soon as available. And some of the documents, like annotated agenda or a scenario note, we are updating it, so it will be available within the usual 6-week deadline by the 15th of January. If there is any request from the stakeholders to provide additional information document, we encourage you to contact us as soon as possible, and in advance of that deadline. So early January would be the very, very, very latest time when you could contact us on this. Finally, just two final slides, we'd like to mention some of the other initiatives that are taking place in the meantime. So the co-chairs of the IP process have launched a consultation process to provide some high-level reflections, and also to discuss with the stakeholders some issues relevant for IP42. And this process was started early November. And last week on Friday, we have finalized, there was a deadline for providing comments from the constituencies. And all of the comments received have been already posted on the web page, which is, you can find the link below. So if any of you are interested on what stakeholders from various regions and stakeholder groups have provided in response to that request from the IP co-chairs, you are happy to digest and to have a look on them. The IP co-chairs will have the update on the consultation process during the meeting of the Bureau, ICCM5 Bureau, which is taking place next week. And then some further steps will be announced later of that. And just the final slide, I would like to mention that the regional briefings will be online briefings, will be organized with all the regions following the publication of all the documents in mid January. and they will take end of in the week of 25th and 23rd of January for Africa, Asia Pacific, Sea, and for GRULAC region. And we expect to have the one for Western Europe and other region in early February. The date is still to be confirmed. With that, I would like to thank you and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Maybe very quickly, IP for the resume session will be only face-to-face. You will have live stream, but no online participation, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We have the same setting as we had for the setting in Bucharest. So this is a face-to-face meeting with streaming. Yes, thank you.
And Kevin, as well, for you, for the science policy, it will only be face-to-face. So now I'm turning to my left. So David, your turn.
Thanks, Jacqueline, and thank you all. And I can see how busy it is for everyone, and certainly for BRS, it is very busy, trying to catch up from COVID, all the backlog of work there, and then only having 11 months between our face-to-face segment of our COPs and then our face-to-face COP in May of next year. And to sort of expect your question, yes, that will only be a face-to-face meeting as well. So that's known. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just move quickly through the intersessional work that's ongoing. We're about halfway through the intersessional work, which Carlos mentioned, all the meetings that are ongoing. And so what we're really looking at is part of our sprint is making sure that we get all our subsidiary bodies completed. I won't even mention all the intersessional working groups, but to start with these, there's a subsidiary body of the Basel Convention on Implementation on Compliance, which assists parties to comply with their obligations under the convention and facilitates, promotes, monitors, and aims to secure implementation and compliance. So this is a very important group. They've considered several individual cases. They've reviewed the classifications and the national reporting process in general. They've developed a program of work, and they even held a joint session with the newly developed Rotterdam Compliance Committee, which I'll mention earlier. But this is a group that always gets a lot of work done and helps countries to get into compliance with the Basel Convention. Also mentioned that there was a plastic waste partnership meeting that took place, I guess it's a couple of weeks ago now in Punta del Este, just before the INC on plastics. And this partnership is to mobilize business, government, academic, moving too fast. So this partnership is to mobilize business, government, academic, and civil society to promote and improve ESM of plastic waste at all levels and prevent and minimize its generation. So they had the third meeting, as I mentioned, and so they approved a report on best practices and lessons learned. They approved a compilation of national and international specifications related to Basel Convention plastic waste amendments. And for its future work plan, the working group discussed development of products to disseminate best practices and promote policy development in various topics of relevance to this discussion. And then what's coming up now is the open-ended working group of the Basel Convention, and it assists the COP in keeping up with the continuous review of implementation of the various mandates that it provides, in particular to these intersessional working groups. It's just a 3-day meeting this time, so we will have to work very quickly to consider recommendations to improve the strategic framework, develop recommendations on improving the function of the Basel PIC procedure, and consider various technical guidelines, including those on POPs, plastics waste, and waste lead acid batteries. and will consider other guidelines and technical fact sheets. And it will continue to progress work on legal clarity. And as I mentioned, there's a number of, for all those, there are sort of intersessional processes related in particular in areas of legal clarity, technical guidelines, but I won't go into all those now. So now move to Rotterdam Convention and update there. So the RC subsidiary body is on the first one is on the Chemical Review Committee, and it had its 18th meeting in September in Rome, and it finalized decision guidance documents on 2 chemicals. And these chemicals then can be considered for listing at the COPs in 2023. And it reviewed notices of final regulatory action for a wide range, and especially there's quite a few chemicals on the agenda. And if those where they're seen to meet the criteria, then they move to the next stage, which is developing the decision guidance document. And so this happened for methylparathion and paraquat. So those will not be on the agenda for this COP, but the future one, because they'll still have to develop decision guidance documents for that. And then, as I mentioned, there was a newly established Rotterdam Compliance Committee, and that group held its first meeting just in November, back in just across the street here, and they agreed on modalities for its work and decisions and recommendations, and they dealt with many general issues related to compliance and laws, regulations, exports, imports, information exchange, information submission, and cooperation with the Basel Convention, ICC. And they looked at the program of work and budget. And as mentioned before, they even had a joint session with the Basel ICC. So that was a sort of a historic event, and it was the very first long-awaited establishment of that committee. I'll just mention one other development that is quite significant, and this is a proposal by Switzerland, Australia, Burkina Faso, and recently added were Ghana and Mali. I'm sorry, and Mali. So that these were this is a proposal to mend the Rotterdam Convention, and including adding a new Annex 8 to the convention. I won't try to describe it here since one of the proponents is in the room, but the idea is to establish a new annex in addition to Annex 3 for listing chemicals that have been found by the Chemicals Review Committee to meet the criteria for listing in Annex 3, but for which the COP was not able to agree to list. They weren't able to reach consensus that's required for listing in Annex 3. But it does establish rights and obligations for parties to the amended convention in relation to chemicals listed in a new annex, Annex 8. And for those parties that have agreed to be bound by this, then the PIC procedure would apply to those chemicals. And so this amendment was circulated at the end of October, 6 months before the COPs as required by the convention. There are other developments, and we'll go through those perhaps further in a future briefing. Okay. And then we go to Stockholm Convention, and I'll just cover the one at this particular meeting, but this is on the POPs Review Committee, which also met in September in Rome. The POPs Review Committee and the CRC meet back to back, and they recommended to the COP that it consider 2 new chemicals for listing, and that's Declarin Plus, which is a flame retardant and used in other purposes, and then UV328, which is it's a ultraviolet radiation absorber in a wide range of products, including plastics. So there is a link to the work on plastics there. And then they've adopted risk profiles for a couple of other chemicals, but those chemicals whereas the first two chemicals will be considered at the meeting of the COP in 2023. The other two will not be ready until the 2025 COP if they continue on in the approval process in the pop rock. So moving right along. So the COPs will be held from 1 to 12 May 2023 here in Geneva at the Geneva International Conference Center. There will be, on the 30th of April, there'll be regional meetings, and there'll be no high-level segment. And as mentioned before, this will be a face-to-face meeting without the possibility of online participation. And then just the road ahead, we've already had 3 individual bureaus meetings, 1 for each COP, and those took place in October. And then next month, we have a joint bureau meeting from the 18th to the 19th of January. And at that meeting, there will actually be the tentative schedule of work for the COPs. And I don't know if you've seen these before, but they're actually very complicated because we switch from one convention. Well, there's joint sessions. We switch from one convention to another and try to space out the work to get as much as possible done during the 2-week period. So that will be available soon after that meeting. And then on the road ahead, as I mentioned, as is laid out here in November, the invitation letters were sent out. In December, there was a notification to observers, and the finalization of the theme of the COP will take place this month. And then the deadline for party registration is the 25th of January, and that's, of course, very important for those that are seeking financial assistance to participate in the meeting. The budget documents and a few other documents will be available by the 1st of February. They have to be out 3 months before the meetings. And then all the other documents will be out by the 1st of March, which is 2 months before the meetings. In March, we also have these regional preparatory meetings, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And then there'll be a series of webinars in April. And then here's quickly the schedule for the regional prep meetings. Asia Pacific in March. What does that mean? 2 minutes. I'm watching here. We've got Asia Pacific is in Bangkok, the Africa in March, and then the Africa one is in Dakar. Eastern Europe is in Zagreb. The last 3 days are, well, the 28th to the 30th of March, and then also in Panama City from the 28th to 30th of March for the GRULAC region. So those are confirmed. This is just the meetings that are coming up. I won't go through these at this point, just to mention that that we are going to be doing some chairs training again, which is a very popular program, and it will include SciCam, representatives from SciCam, Minamata, Plastic INC. So it's a very valuable training that I think that really helped to prepare to become chairs of subsidiary bodies and even COPs eventually. So the last thing is that there will be what we have at every COP is sort of a fair on the side of the COP. And the first is, and this is going to be on PCBs this year. It's important because of the deadlines in the Stockholm Convention to eliminate use by 2025 and then complete disposal by 2028. So it's quite timely. And the idea is to raise awareness and accelerate action to meet these deadlines. And so this will take place the 3rd to the 5th during the COPs. More information will be available soon. Thank you.
That was the fastest 2 minutes ever. Thank you so much, David. Yes, and congratulations for the compliance committee set up. Finally, that's a great success. Turning into our other MEA, Minamata, Claudia, please.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. It's so nice to see you in this particular capacity. It's so lovely to have you in this way in the Chemical and Waste Cluster. My name is Claudia ten Hafe, and I would like to build on and under the chapeau that was so well presented by Executive Secretary Monika Stankiewicz on some of the specific work of the Minamata Convention. And also just to say, Carlos generously also already indicated some of the joint works. I will not be repeating any of that in the interest of time. Mindful of the time, I have 12 slides, 9 issues, and 10 minutes, and I shall seek to do justice to that. But please know that our slides are available afterwards, and there may be more detail on it. And you are always welcome to reach out to any of us or to stop by for a coffee, and we shall be happy to give you more information. With that, let me go on to the first of these slides, which gives a snapshot of the work that we are not only doing now, but just to contextualize it in terms of our journey, the Minamata journey, now in preparation of the 5th COP, which is upcoming. It is in the 4th quarter of next year, so we will be after the BRS COPs. Our usual cycle has been restored after the unusualness, of course, of that the pandemic has brought with it. But I will go into some of the details of the last bit of that slide in terms of the key topics that we have under preparation with US parties, and I see many in the room. Thank you for coming, and also online in terms of the work and with regard to updates since our last briefing. Let me take you to maybe one of our keystone topics, and that we are very, of course, very happy about the enthusiasm of our parties on the preparations for the first effectiveness evaluation of the Minamata Convention. This is a very specific and special part of the convention to ensure, of course, over the long term that the Minamata Convention delivers on what it set out to do. The first effectiveness evaluation was launched at COP4, and so there's work underway. And I'd like in the next 3 slides just to draw your attention to 3 parts of that work. Here, and it might be too small for you to see, but please just visit our intersessional page to get all the information. We've recently had a Minamata online event in November, middle of November, about the call for parties and others to make further comments to the refined list of indicators that will be put forward for adoption at COP4. And here you see projected the comment sheet, you see the original text of the indicator, you see some of the refinement after the very valuable comments that were received during the intersessional period building up to COP4, and also the discussions at COP4. So just for you to be perfectly oriented both in the work that's already been done, but also what still remains to be completed ahead of COP5. The deadline for those comments is the 31st of January. We hope, of course, that this deadline works for parties and stakeholders. It's very important to know that this refined list is more matching to the hopes, and if and where something is still missing, that we know so earliest to be able to support parties in this regard. Let me take you to the next part, and just to say here, the open-ended scientific group has been very busy. They have already met 5 times in this intersessional period. This is one of the bodies established under the effectiveness evaluation. The second body that has not yet, the terms of reference have not yet been completed in terms of the number of representatives, is the actual group overseeing this work. So that is a very important part to bring to COP5. In other words, to agree on the number of representatives per region to the effectiveness evaluation group, a type of committee to oversee the entire process. But in anticipation of that, the science group has been extremely busy. There are 40-something members on this group currently. It is open-ended, so any party that has not yet been in a position to nominate, you are most welcome to still do so. And all of the materials and the work that's already been ongoing is available through the intersessional workspace links available. And to say we are also planning, while most of the work this year has still been online, our intersessional work is also moving into face-to-face meetings next year as the work comes together, and maybe the more detailed negotiations or completions do require that physical presence. And so this group will be meeting at the end of March next year, and we very much look forward to this very dynamic part of the effectiveness evaluation work. Let me also take you to just an update on 2 reports that have been commissioned by the COP and that are underway of preparation. On the one hand, the Mercury Trade, Supply and Demand report, and on the other hand, the Article 21 synthesis report. I won't go into detail. The detail is here, but should you have any question, please just let us know. This takes me to the next point, which is on gender. We have a very ambitious, we had a very supportive decision at COP4 on the work of gender. And Monica mentioned, of course, also the special vulnerabilities that come with mercury, but actually, in fact, with all of our chemicals. So we share this across our family of MEAs. The work here has also been going rapidly. We've had stakeholder consultations and yesterday also party consultations on the roadmap forward. Again, in both sets of consultation, quite a lot of participation, which we are very excited about. But if anybody else would still like to join or make any other submission, please do so. We would be most welcome we would be most happy to have your input. The third topic I would like to draw your attention to is that we also have our financial mechanism second review upcoming. Monica mentioned the centrality of this mechanism to the work of our convention, and submissions had been invited as per the terms of reference by September. We've noted that actually very few parties have made submissions, and we would just like to say that even though the official date of submission was September, we would earnestly like to encourage parties and others to make submissions on the financial mechanism so that the reviewer, the independent reviewer, has as much information as at hand for this very important task, periodic task, in fact, as mandated and requested by the convention text. Let me take you to the next topic, and that is national reporting. And we always are quite happy to see the high level of national reporting by our parties. We have a 92% reporting rate. We are awaiting 10 reports and are reaching out in all ways to those remaining 10, but we hope to have them in soon. The preliminary report has already gone to the Implementation and Compliance Committee, and they have also been very enthused by the high reporting rate. And so we hope to have the remaining reports in time for the next meeting of the Implementation and Compliance Committee that will be meeting in person here in Geneva in March of next year. But just to also draw your attention to a piece of work that was also requested by COP4, which is any additional comments parties may have on the draft guidance that was prepared by the Secretariat on reporting. In particular, any additional comments parties may have in light of their own learning on completing the full reports. And we have such a high reporting rate that I'm sure all parties may have an opinion on how useful or not the guidance were, and if there was anything that we could do to make them even more helpful or add to it, please let us know. We've had a dedicated Minamata online session on this, and there's a dedicated form for comment, and you can make comments as you go or by the deadline. We have been receiving some already and are very grateful for that. But just to draw your attention to that, including all of the documentation in that regard. And then we've had the Minamata Convention specific international program board meeting has just convened. We have quite a new board. We've had 4 recurring members, and we have a whole host of new persons on the board, but many experienced persons from other similar boards and other conventions. So it's very good experience coming into this board. And as co-chairs elected are Gina Griffith from Suriname and Andrew Clark from the United States. So 2 very experienced and very trusted negotiators across the conventions, but for certainly also for Minamata. And we're very happy to see that. The board discussed the implementation status of the 24 projects under implementation. In fact, 4 are already closed, so it was also to look at that. But it also is looking at the midterm evaluation of the SIP and also the second financial mechanism deadline. So with that, we hope to be able to launch the 4th round as soon as possible. And so the board is not yet in a position to launch that round, but hopes, based on the envelope to the specific trust fund, to do so shortly. There are more slides, which I will not go into much detail of, but for those that work on releases, this is a status of that. A couple of meetings have happened on that, in fact, and the draft of the work on the BAP of releases will be released shortly for comment. We also have ongoing work on thresholds. Again, the details are here on the slide, and there will be a face-to-face meeting on this, which is actually just after the meeting with our colleagues at the Basel, for the Basel Convention, and on purpose because of so many officials in overlap in this. So we're very happy for that collaboration. Let me just give you a small status update on our general and specific and special trust funds. We have I'd like to say 70%, but our admin officer would like to say 69.83% in of our contributions, and we're extremely happy to have this. Contributions are due by the end of the year, so we still have a couple of weeks. If any of our parties do not have their contributions in yet and are in need of their letter, maybe it's gotten lost, please just let us know and we shall be happy to do so. And the last slide, important, we have our amendment, a notice out. Of course, our Annex A was amended in terms of the product categories of mercury added products. Please see the detail here, and our amendment would come into force on the 28th of September next year, just shortly before we actually meet with all of you here in Geneva for our COP5. With that, thank you very much, and handing back.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And when we say 92%, we can say 100, right? If we approximate. So congratulations for that big achievement. Now I'm passing the floor to Sandra.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and hello, colleagues in the room and online. I'm Sandra Averus. I'm acting as Knowledge and Risk Unit Head for the Chemicals and Health branch, in the Chemicals and Health branch. And I would like just to provide today a brief overview of the work that we're doing in support of these negotiations and in support of the events that will be upcoming in 2023. And in particular, we've had a number of briefings where we highlighted, the science and the knowledge that the branch is providing, and sometimes spearheading some of the processes, and I'll just mention the GCO2, the Global Chemicals Outlook 2, or the issues report that have been developed as a follow-up to requests from UNEA resolutions. And today I would like to highlight some work related to supporting implementation and how we gather partners around these important topics related to chemicals and waste. And maybe one of the most relevant work to highlight when we look into implementation and into partnership is the Global Mercury Partnership that was created in 2005, by UNEP Governing Council, and that has supported in its early stages the development and finally the birth of the convention, and is now supporting its implementation together with providing some knowledge and science on mercury, as well as delivering outreach and awareness raising. So the partnership is just had its 13th Partnership Advisory Group meeting in November 2022, where we could look into the exchanges on recent activities, priorities, the spread out to a wide network with some webinars that are in small highlighted below, and the recent knowledge and science that is coming out on mercury in oil and gas and mercury in non-ferrous metal mining and smelting. This is just really to highlight how a multi-stakeholder, bringing like all the different stakeholders around the table, multi-stakeholder partnership can continue support and help the implementation of these important agendas. Another highlight I wanted to put forward, and in the next slide you'll see a summary of it, but is the Minamata National Action Plans, and as they get submitted to the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention, I think 22 have been submitted at the moment. We are, with the support of the GEF and the partnership, we are, as UNEP, extracting this information and putting it in a database that you can find here in the slide, and you will find in the GEN website later on. So it's providing the key baseline figures. It's providing the occurrence of worst practices in the countries that have submitted their NAP. It's providing qualitative baseline information, and we hope it will be a useful tool, and it is a useful tool for parties when looking at the trends and on ASGM in that case. Another dashboard that I wanted to highlight supporting implementation of MEAs is related to the UNEP GEF project on POPs monitoring, global monitoring plans, and is really putting forward all the data, information, lessons learned that we could put forward on POPs monitoring in, if I recall, with more than 60 labs. 200 labs. I can't remember the number. Jacqueline will tell us. And this is really an interesting aspect because it also helps supporting the policy development and addressing the POPs in countries. And that's what the case study in Vanuatu is showcasing here, how the monitoring of POPs supports the action and implementation. I'll go briefly over the DDT dashboard and just say we have put all these dashboard and information on the World Environment Situation Room. So the link that is on the right-hand side of the slide, bottom right, is driving you to these dashboards. So hopefully you can play with them, and this can also inform the further developments and discussions of the next year and forward. Another element, not related to MEAs, but to the Beyond 2020 process, and my colleague Rafal has referred to it, IOMC, so the 9 organizations at the moment working on chemicals management have been putting forward this paper document on strengthening integrated chemicals and waste management, and at IIP 4.1 in Bucharest. And as a follow-up, a workshop is being organized in Paris on 18 and 19 January to address global chemicals and waste management in chemical-intensive economic sectors and value chain. So we very much hope to have a multi-stakeholder workshop again, building on the knowledge and experience of the different stakeholders, and of course those that are very active in these economic sectors and value chains, and to discuss how there could be either guiding principles, roadmaps, or specific engagement from the sector to support a sound management of chemicals and waste in the context of the Beyond 2020. So this meeting is organized by IOMC and is hosted at the OECD in Paris in January 2023. And maybe 2 last elements related to the implementation of resolution. At UNEA this year, the resolution 5/7 has welcomed the Green and Sustainable Chemistry Framework Manual and its executive summary, and has encouraged their use as appropriate. So UNEP is dedicating the year of 2022-2023 to its uptake and implementation. And this includes, we are at the early stage, but development with UNITAR of an e-learning course. It also includes work on specific sectors, such as a workshop that is going to take place on the 20th of January in Paris on green and sustainable chemistry and the building sector. So this is just an illustration, again, of more than 80 or 100 experts that have come together to highlight the principal objectives that you see on the screen of green and sustainable chemistry. And maybe one last word, which is related to antimicrobial resistance. UNEP, together with, has joined early this year what was called the tripartite, now the quadripartite. So in collaboration with FAO, with WHO, and WOAH, the Animal Health Organization, have been advancing the work on antimicrobial resistance, and in particular from our standpoint, the environmental dimension. And that included through the participation of the third ministerial conference on antimicrobial resistance that took place in Muscat, Amman, with the Muscat Declaration. But some other highlights are included in this slide, and for the sake of time, I won't go through all of them, but wanted also to highlight the AMR Global Leaders Group meeting and the current open call for application to become part of this Global Leaders Group meeting. So you can check up the website that is in the slide, and looking for application by end of December. And I think I'll stop there. These were a few illustrative elements of the work that we're conducting to help support the implementation of this very busy international agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And when I hear all of you, it's always very encouraging to see the different topics that we are dealing with. And sometimes it's under the heading of chemicals and waste. And sometimes it becomes other topics of agenda, like the antimicrobial resistance. But thank you very much for the presentation. And now I'm turning again to my right to a person that is a big supporter of the chemicals and waste agenda, and from a country that also has been supporting not only the Geneva Environment community, but also the international negotiations very much. So Michel, please, it's over to you.
Thank you. Do you want to take some questions first, perhaps?
Okay. That's a good reminder.
To you.
Okay, so I just lost my presentation about you. Anyway, thank you very much. Yes, I think we will go first to questions and answers. And from what I have seen, there are no so far, but I would like to maybe highlight that we have over 120 people online, plus others in social media, the crowd here as well. Any questions at this moment in this room to any of the presenters? So everything was very clear. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Vanessa Liaga from the Permanent Mission of Peru. First and foremost, thanking everyone for all the information provided. This has been really educational, particularly for me as a new delegate that'll be covering or assisting in the coverage of the chemicals portfolio. So thank you so much for all the information that has been shared. I have two questions that might perhaps be a little too ignorant, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask them. One was the process for the SciChem. They were references to negotiations going on for a text, but it wasn't clear to me what that text was. I'm sorry if I missed that. And then the other question, very concretely, was the national focal points. They said that we were lacking some designations for the Latin American Caribbean region. Are we supposed to have one per country? Because I saw 15 were already assigned, so I was wondering how many were missing. And yes, if it's all of Latin America and the Caribbean, I guess is my question. That's all I can think of for right now, but I'll probably have more questions in a little bit. Thank you.
Yes, and maybe yes, before turning to Rafael, I would like to thank and congratulate your ambassador for being the president of the INC in plastics, Ambassador Gustavo, and I don't remember his last. Yes, okay, thank you. Rafael, please.
Yes, thank you so much. I will answer the first question. So yeah, we are now in the process of negotiating a document that in the future will create a framework for the post-SICAM. So if you go to our webpage, there is a report from the meeting in Bucharest, and annexed to it is it includes a consolidated text that was prepared by the co-chairs of the process, and that compiled the work done by the various thematic groups in Bucharest. So I'm happy to share with you and show you the link and send it to you if needed. So this is kind of like a document still in progress because we'll continue working on that document in Nairobi. I'm not sure if I am the one to answer the question on the focal points.
No, that was SPP. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, the focal point nomination process has been a little bit of a long drawn out process, I'm afraid. We are working through our newly appointed bureau members to facilitate that process and our regional offices around the world to encourage member states to come forward with their nominations. I think, to be perfectly frank, it's a little bit of competing priorities with the Plastics INC. Running these two big processes at the same time is, we tend to get a little bit forgotten about. So if you would like access to that list, it is on the website and it is updated regularly. And if you pass your details, I can put you in touch with the person who manages that.
Thank you. Yes, I don't see any other questions. Right, Diana? We don't have any others? Okay. So now, yes, I'll the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for giving me the floor. My name is Michel Chiren. It's a pleasure to be here for this Gen briefing on behalf of the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment. Many thanks to the Geneva Environment Network, Diana and the whole team for organizing this event, and to all the speakers today for their presence and for sharing their views and the wealth of information about the ongoing and upcoming negotiations. Many decisions have been taken this year that were big steps, thinking in particular about UNEA with the science policy decision and the plastics decision. And I also think about the BRS COPs with the Basel e-waste amendment. And before that, also the adoption of the Rotterdam compliance mechanism. There's also the amendments adopted at the last Minamata COPs. So with all of this in the chemicals and waste field, we can say that actors show the willingness to act on important and pressing issues. And it gives me confidence that this positive commitment will continue also in the future. 2023 will be a chemicals and waste year with many such opportunities to take other necessary, ambitious steps for the chemicals and waste management at the global level, and of course the implementation on the ground. I would like to highlight the Rotterdam Convention Amendment proposal, that was submitted earlier this year by Switzerland, Australia, and Mali, and which is now also co-sponsored by the governments of Ghana and Burkina Faso. David, you have already introduced this proposal and deferred to me, but I think you did a good job by mentioning the content of the proposal. I can say a couple of words about the rationale for having put forward such a proposal. So in the past, and in particular at the past Rotterdam Conference of the Parties, there was a general frustration because of the cases where the Conference of the Parties has failed to list chemicals in Annex 3, despite the fact that these chemicals fulfill the criteria to be listed. And such chemicals include, for example, chrysotile asbestos. They could not be listed in the convention for many years now, although the great majority of parties are in favor and have been in favor of following the recommendation by the CRC to list them in Annex 3, and only a handful of parties opposed the listing. This undermines the objective of the convention, and this is why Switzerland, together with Australia and Mali, and Ghana and Burkina Faso, we are proposing to the parties at the next COP to amend the convention that will take place, as mentioned by David, in May next year. The proposal foresees a new annex. This annex will be additional to the existing Annex 3, and chemicals for which the COP is not able to list in Annex 3 will be listed in this new annex. And the decision to list in the new annex can be taken by a majority vote, 3/4 majority vote, as a last resort, if all efforts to reach consensus are exhausted. The new annex has the same rights and obligations for the parties as the existing Annex 3. For instance, the prior informed consent procedure, the PIC, would apply the same way as for the existing annex. The only modification is that an explicit consent is required, making the new annex a bit more stringent than the existing Annex 3. We think the adoption of that proposal will significantly strengthen the convention and will be an important step towards the sound management of chemicals. The proponents certainly welcome the support to this proposal, and governments that would like to become a co-sponsor can, of course, contact me for Switzerland, or the colleagues from Australia and Mali and Ghana and Burkina Faso in order to do so. And we are, of course, happy also to take questions and engage in discussions around the proposal. With regard to the Science Policy Panel, the upcoming meeting, the OEWG 1.2, will be important to include from the start different disciplines, so not just the environment side, but also other sectors, and in particular the health side, and therefore also the WHO. Kevin, you have also mentioned the discussion around the scope. It seems wise to me to adopt an approach where there would be a broad scope, and there would not be a restriction from the start, but rather we would, through that process of the OEWG, install good procedures for priority setting and also for agreeing the program of work and the budget of the new Science Policy Panel. This way, the plenary of the SPP can decide on the assessments, which ones should be carried out, which ones should be prioritized, and will not be restricted over time in the scope when potential new issues might arise some years down from now. In order to ensure a good link from the latest scientific knowledge to the policymakers, which is really the goal of the panel, academia should have a crucial role in the science policy panel. And academia should therefore also be very present and involved in the science policy OEWG process from the start. I would like to express my thanks to the government of Thailand for hosting the meeting in January in Bangkok, and of course also UNEP for the preparatory work towards that meeting. I would also encourage all colleagues and everyone present also online in this meeting to consider registration for this meeting. As we've heard, deadlines are coming up and the meeting is not so far away. It is also my pleasure, of course, here to confirm the information provided by you, Kevin, earlier, that the Swiss government has extended an invitation to host the science policy open-ended working group meeting in 2024, so OEWG 3. So these are a few points that I wanted to highlight from the discussion, from the very rich discussion here today. I think that's just picking out a few. The information today was very rich, and I think that is precisely the aim of the Chemicals and Waste briefings. It is the GEN who does provide in a concise way this platform on this wealth of information about the ongoing negotiations, and I think it's very useful, certainly for many governments and other stakeholders. Therefore, I want to thank again Diana and the whole GEN team for having organized the meeting, and in particular also all of the many speakers that took the time here to brief us about what has happened this year and what is coming up in terms of opportunities to engage. So thank you very much, and back to you, Jacqueline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Always learning in these briefings, a lot of sharing of a lot of information. I'd like to extend a particular thanks to the GEN and to Diana for organizing this last briefing of the year on chemicals and waste. So thank you very much, Diana, and your team. Now we are closing the event today, but as you might have smelled or seen before entering, there is coffee outside. So we still have around 15 minutes before lunchtime. It would be great if you can stay and maybe share some views and discuss some points as well. So please feel free. Thank you very much to all. And I have a squeak.